So the Commander mechanic recently posted a challenge to everybody on Twitter, and I figured I would go ahead and try it myself, given the type of stuff that I already do on my channel. So here is the challenge. You're handed $50, a Murders at Karlov Manor pre-release kit, and you're given 60 minutes to make a Commander deck. You get Soul Ring, you get Arcane Signet, and you get Command Tower already provided. Can you build a working deck? What legend are you hoping to open? What's your first buy? So there's two ways you can go about this. You can either sit at your local game store and try to do this all at once, which means you're going to be beholden to the time of the local game store, or you can try doing this on something like Moxfield. Build a deck within those deck restrictions, and then hit the buy button on TCG Player and have the deck come to you. So I figure here's how we're going to be working this particular challenge. We're going to select only one card from Karlov Manor, and that's going to be our legendary that we're going to use. Everything else is something that we have to pick up within the $50. And of course, we get given the Arcane Signet and Soul Ring and stuff, but I managed to get something built for under the $50 limit anyway. So let's go ahead and see what our commander is. People have been asking for this one anyway in the comments, and she doesn't quite fit into the budget restrictions of the $15 decks. So let's go ahead and talk about Vannifar, the Evolved Enigma, the slime girl of the Simic Guild, the elf ooze wizard. She is wonderful, and I actually did pull her from my Karlov Manor stuff on the day of release, so this actually works out for me very, very well. But Vannifar is a 4-mana commander that says at the beginning of combat, either cloak a card in your hand or put a 1/1 counter on every colorless creature you control. Now, the cloaking mechanic is fairly simple. You're just putting the card face down as a morph creature, and then you can flip it up at any time for its mana cost. It also gets Ward 2 as a disguised creature. So what are we going to be doing? Well, I figured we're going to be building a Flicker deck based on making all of the biggest, most stupid, obnoxious creatures come onto the board and deal tons and tons of damage to everybody for basically no mana. So let's get right into the deck. Before we get fully started, though, if you haven't subscribed to Commander Mechanic already, please consider doing so. They are a wonderful resource for learning how to upgrade precons and keep in touch with some of the new stuff that's been going on with Commander lately, so please go check them out. Alrighty, let's get into the deck. Let's talk about Slime Girls and how they interact with some of our big boys. Let's go ahead and start with a very easy section. Very, very easy. We are talking about the big section of the deck. These are some of the big hits we are trying to grab with our budget deck. And if you notice down there, the deck's price is $53.09, with 6 of those dollars coming from the Commander. And remember, that was our free card that we got from the Markov Manor pre-release kit. So let's begin with Ulamog's Crusher, an 8-mana Eldrazi with Annihilator 2. It attacks every turn if able, and Annihilator says that if you happen to swing, opponents have to sacrifice however many numbers are on the Annihilator trigger of permanents on their board. Then we have Artisan of Kozilek. If you cast it, which, mind you, if we use our commander, we are not casting it, we are cloaking it. So Artisan of Kozilek, we will probably not get this first ability all the time. Sometimes you will, though, if you happen to hard cast it. When you cast it, return any creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield, and then it has Annihilator 2, and then the Path Razor of Ulamog. It can't be blocked except by 3 or more creatures, and it's got Annihilator 3. These are big, chunky Eldrazi boys, and if you play a non-budget version of this deck, feel free to throw even more bigger, chunkier Eldrazi boys in the deck. Then we have Avenger of Zendikar. Anytime it enters the battlefield, put an 0/1 green plant creature token on the battlefield for every land you control, and we are going to be able to abuse this effect. And whenever a land enters the battlefield under our control, you can put a 1/1 counter on every plant creature you control. So we are going to be abusing the Avenger of Zendikar because of the next section of the deck, the Blink section. So here's how this is going to work. You have your commander, right? This girl right here, Vannifar. You cloak a card for free. Then you spend a mana on an Essence Flux. You get to bounce the card. Now, your Avenger of Zendikar doesn't cost 7, it costs 1. It costs the price of an Essence Flux. Or sometimes that's free, because, well, let's talk about this section. We have 12 Blink cards to go over, and again, you can put more in here if you're playing a non-budget version, and you can afford to put, like, Conjurer's Closet and Thassa in here, but otherwise, let's go ahead and look here. Essence Flux, exile a creature you control, put it back onto the battlefield with a 1/1 counter. Ghostly Flicker, take 2 creatures you control and flicker them. Displace, take 2 creatures you control, flicker them. Illusionist Stratagem, take 2 creatures you control, flicker them. Void Walk, flicker a creature, and then it has Cipher, so you can put this then on a creature afterwards. And every time that creature swings, you'll be able to get a flicker as well. So if you put this on a creature, you're going to be able to flicker your big guys over and over and over again without having to worry about it, instead of having to spend mana on them. Planar Incision lets you flicker a card, and then you get a 1/1 counter on it. Nephalia Smuggler, you can pay 4 mana and tap it to flicker a creature, which is just, exiling it, taking it out, and then putting it back onto the battlefield. Teferi's Time Twist, flicker a creature, give it a 1/1 counter. Siren's Ruse, flicker a creature, and if it's a pirate, draw a card. And Blur, flicker a creature and draw a card. And then we have Meneldor, the Swift Savior. If it deals combat damage to a player, flicker a creature you own and then put it back on the battlefield. That is important because that means that we can actually take creatures that people have stolen from us with things like Nicol Bolas and just put them back onto our own battlefields. If people take things with Hostage Taker, we get to take them back with Meneldor, the Swift Savior. And then we have Golden Argosy. Whenever it attacks, exile every creature that crewed it and return them onto the battlefield at the beginning of the next end step. So we're going to have this card, it's crew 1. So we're going to have a bunch of creatures that are, that you can tap any number of creatures with power 1 or more to crew it. So all our creatures are power 2 or more because they are morph or disguised. So we're going to tap those creatures to crew the Golden Argosy, swing with the Golden Argosy, and then just those creatures will blink immediately as soon as we do that, which means that we're not having to spend mana on blinking all the time. This means that if we have Avenger of Zendikar, we cloak it out, and then we use Golden Argosy, swing with Golden Argosy, the Avenger of Zendikar's cloaked card runs away, it comes back, it is forced to come back on its front side, as all cards that flicker do, and this gives us our green plants. This also means that every time we want to flicker it, we could just use any of these cards, and these also serve double whammy for us. These do more than just let us get our cards out for basically free. These cards also protect our cards. If our opponent tries to hit us with a Swords to Plowshare, you can just flicker your Avenger of Zendikar or your Eldrazi's away with the Swords to Plowshare. So not only do you get an automatic refresh of whatever their ability is that you're trying to win with, but you also gain the ability to dodge targeted removal, which is super important. But these aren't the only things we're going to be flickering in the deck. We also have these strong blink synergy pieces. Let's go ahead and talk about Kadama of the East Tree. If any permanent enters the battlefield under your control, if it wasn't put onto the battlefield with his ability, you may put a card with a converted mana cost equal to that card or less than that card on the battlefield. So if you play a land, you automatically get a new land. If you disguise a disguised card doesn't have a mana value, so you get a land out. When you flicker a card, you get whatever the mana value of the card is when you flicker it. Kadama is going to be doing a ton of work for you in this deck. And the only drawback of Kadama usually is that he has a high cost, but we are not playing a deck that cares about his cost. We are going to be flickering him. Then we have Threefold Thunder Hulk. Anytime it enters the battlefield, or in this case flickers, we get to make 3 1/1 gnomes. We can also sack artifacts to give it more counters, because every time it swings, it gives us an amount of gnomes equal to his power. So we're going to be flickering this a lot and making a ton of gnomes, and then we're going to make him bigger and make more gnomes with him. So Threefold Thunder Hulk coming down for basically 0, 2, or 1 mana because of the way our deck works, and it's going to get us a ton of gnome tokens. And you're going to make those gnome tokens hit big with Endray's Forerunners. Again, we're not paying 8 for this, we're paying 0 for it and then flickering it. When it enters the battlefield, all your creatures get Vigilance and Trample until end of turn, and we can actually do some fun combat tricks with this. So you can have the Endray's Forerunners flicker, and then all your creatures gain the big ability. You swing out with them, and if our opponent does a combat trick of some kind, we just flicker the Endray's Forerunners again to keep stacking that +2/+2 and Vigilance and Trample on every single creature we have. Also helps it dodge combat if we need it to. So just a ridiculously powerful card in a deck like this, though if you wanted to go non-budget, you can always trade out the Endray's Forerunner for a big stompy Craterhoof. Then you have the Scroll of Fate, manifest a card from your hand. So this is the lieutenant of the deck. Functionally, that's all this is. This is the lieutenant of the deck. If our commander is gone and we cannot pay for it for whatever reason, Scroll of Fate is the lieutenant to our commander. It lets us do the exact same thing our commander is doing at the exact same rate. And then Diluvian Primordial, when it enters the battlefield, get an instant or sorcery from everybody's graveyard and cast it for free, which is really strong. I don't know if I have to explain to you how strong casting 3 cards for the price of 1 flicker is important and really good. But let's move on to the next things we are going to be flickering. These are the deck's clones, and we have 4 of them. You're gonna love this particular section. Let's begin with the Hulking Metalmorph. It comes into play as a copy of any artifact or creature, except it is an artifact and it has Hulking Metamorph's power and toughness, so this can actually end up being stronger than most of the things in our deck, even after it's flickered. And because we are a flicker deck, we can just pay 0 mana for this, make it clone a thing that's important to us, and then anytime we need it to be a different creature, we just flicker it again. Then the Tomb of Horrors Adventurer. When it comes into play, take the initiative, which means we're going to get a basic land out of the deck, and then we get to play with the initiative throughout the rest of the game, if you care to. It's not the most important thing for this deck, but the initiative does end on being able to get a bunch of cards cast for free, so it's not the worst thing in the world to flicker the Tomb of Horrors Adventurer and just repeat that initiative thing over and over and over again for us. The important part of this card, though, is when you cast your second spell each turn, you get to copy it, and if you've completed a dungeon, you can copy that spell twice. So now we get to have 2 copies of flicker cards, 3 copies of flicker cards if we finish a dungeon. This card gets out of hand really quickly. People will have to kill it fast. Then we have Progenitor Mimic. Because the deck has a good density of enter the battlefield powerful effects, the Progenitor Mimic is a clone that comes onto the battlefield and has, at the beginning of your upkeep, if it is not a token, create a copy of this creature. Now note, the Mimic can come down and copy anything at all. It can even just come down as a copy of your commander if you needed it to, so that you could flicker it later onto other things if the game state calls for that. But most of the time, you're going to drop this down, and it's going to be another copy of something like Tomb of Horrors Adventurer, or another Threefold Gear Hulk, or another Endray's Forerunners, or, you know, another Diluvian Primordial, so that every turn, whenever you begin your turn, you get to go, hey, I get to get all of my cards. I get to play all of the cards in everybody's graveyards again and again and again and again until you get rid of this Progenitor Mimic. And if you try to kill it, we're going to use one of our 12 blink spells to make it dodge the killing. So good luck killing it. Please board wipe me. Then we have the card, one of my favorite cards in Magic, Vesuvian Duplimancy. If you cast a spell that targets an artifact or a creature you control, create a token copy of that card. Do you know what cards we have in this deck that copy cards, that target cards? Void Walk, Planar Incision, Siren's Ruse, Blur, Displace, Ghostly Flicker, Essence Flux. All of our blink spells target a creature. Vesuvian Duplimancy says, oh, you wanted to target your Threefold Thunderhulk and make 3 gnomes with it? No. You're making 6 gnomes and 2 Threefold Hulks. Every single time that you flicker a card, you get more of them. And also, the card's not legendary, so we can use this to create copies of our commander so that our commander can cloak multiple cards out of our hand so that we can get multiple big creatures on the board super quickly. But speaking of big creatures, a deck's nothing if you can't get to those creatures, if you cannot get to the cards that you're trying to win with. So let's go ahead and talk about the draw section of this deck. How are we going to be powering through the deck? Let's start with the Fierce Empath. Its ability is you can tutor any creature with mana value 6 or greater from your deck to your hand when you play it. That's like 80% of our deck. We are going to be able to get whatever we need for the time required. Fierce Empath is super good. Also, we can flicker it and just tutor multiple creatures into our hand, and then, of course, disguise them onto the board, and then flicker those creatures. It's going to be nutty. Season of Growth says if a creature enters the battlefield, scry 1, but if we cast a spell that targets a creature, we get to draw a card. So the scry is already really good in a deck that is going to be getting creatures entering the battlefield, quote, quote, multiple times. But the fact that when we cast our flicker spells on our creatures, we get to draw cards is just doubling up on that amazing ability. Then we have Prime Speaker Zagana, enters the battlefield with X/1/1 counters, where X is the greatest power among creatures you control, and then you draw cards equal to Zagana's power. Worst case scenario, you draw 1 card. Best case scenario, you draw like 10. every time you flicker this. So you're going to be in a good spot while this is out. Tishana, the voice of thunder as well. Also, I'm not saying the mana cost on these cards because we're never paying the mana cost on any of these cards. Not really. We are disguising these on the board and then flickering them. Tishana says that her power and toughness are equal to the number of cards in your hand. You have no maximum hand size, and when she enters the battlefield, draw a card for every creature you control. We've got token producers, as I've already shown you, but even if this card is only drawing you 2 or 3 cards every time it comes out, remember, you're not paying any mana for this, really. You're just flickering this with the things in the deck. Thought Monitor draws 2 cards when we flicker it. Garruk's Uprising says when a creature enters the battlefield with power 4 or greater, draw a card, and it gives our creatures trample. Muldrifter gives us 2 cards when we play it. Also, it has Evoke, so you can spend 3 mana instead of 5 mana if you need to pull it out and get the draw, and then flicker it immediately, and then it will stay on the board forever, or you can just disguise it and flicker it. Do whatever works best for you. Garruk's Pack Leader, when another creature enters the battlefield under your control with power 3 or greater, draw a card. Soul of the Harvest, anytime a non-token creature enters the battlefield under your control, draw a card. And then Kiora, anytime a creature with power 4 or greater enters the battlefield, draw a card. We also have the ability to untap target permanent, which has a little bit of synergy with things like the Scroll of Fate, which will let us put more cards on the battlefield as we need. So we have a lot of ways to power through our deck, but how are we going to hard cast some of those cards? Because sometimes our commander isn't going to be out. We need a way to ramp to that stuff. So let's go ahead and talk about the ramp section of the deck. Beginning with Farhaven Elf, when it enters the battlefield, search your library for a basic land and then shuffle. It is a creature, so that means we can flicker it to get more lands. Wood Elves gets a forest, so we can flicker it and get more forests out of the deck. Solemn Simulacrum enters the battlefield, get a basic land. We can also flicker it to get more lands out of the deck. Search for Tomorrow lets us get any basic land onto the battlefield untapped. We can also play it on turn 1 using the Suspend ability. Cultivate and Kadama's Reach are functionally the same card to get 2 lands out of the deck that are basic, 1 to the hand, 1 to the battlefield. Farseek gets a non-forest onto the battlefield, so this can get either the island half of our deck or any of our dual lands that have typing. Nature's Lore gets a forest specifically untapped onto the battlefield, so this of course gives us any of our typed lands as well. Then we have Soul Ring and Arcane Signet because we are given those for free in the challenge. Now, there is one issue we have to address real quick, and that is that our commander is going to be a target. Nobody wants Eldrazi and Avengers of Zendikar and stuff like that coming out for free, so we need to protect our commander. So to do that, we have a Giant's Amulet. I zoomed in for that. Oops. A Giant's Amulet and a Swiftfoot Boots. Both of them will give a creature hexproof, but the Swiftfoot Boots can also give it haste, so when we flicker one of our creatures, we can actually throw the boots onto it to make sure that creature gets a free swing in while it's out. Now, there is a problem this deck can have, and that is running out of flicker cards. So to fix that problem, we need to have a pretty robust recursion section. So we've got 4 ways of recurring cards in the deck. Let's go ahead and take a look at them right now, beginning with Eternal Witness. Enters the battlefield, get any card from your graveyard to your hand. Timeless Witness enters the battlefield, get any card from your graveyard to your hand. Arcane Proxy, when it enters the battlefield, if you cast it, exile target instant or sorcery from your with mana value less than its power, and cast that card without paying its mana cost. So most of the time, we're going to be paying this for 3 and getting a 2 mana flicker card, but sometimes we're going to be just flickering the card and getting an instant or sorcery that costs 4 or less. Torrential Gearhulk will just let us cast any instant card from our graveyard, which is most of our flicker cards, whenever we play it or flicker it. It also can recast things like counter spells, which is going to be important going forward. The Arcane Proxy can do that too. That's a thing you're gonna have to be aware of when we get to the removal section. But here's a trick that I'm gonna show you with the Eternal Witness. It's a fairly known trick to everybody who's abused a flicker deck before, but let's say that you've got a card like Displace, and you say, okay, I'm going to use Displace to get one of my creatures that is disguised with my commander's ability. Say it's my 3-fold Thunderhulk. I'm going to displace my 3-fold Thunderhulk. Well, who's my other target going to be? Am I going to get another value creature? No. You're going to touch Eternal Witness because the card touches the graveyard as you cast it functionally. The Eternal Witness, to blink, the card has to resolve. When your blink card resolves, it is physically in the graveyard and Eternal Witness can grab it. Now you have access to a nigh infinite amount of blinks, so long as you've got the mana to support it. until they kill the Eternal Witness or the Timeless Witness that you have been abusing this mechanic with. So just remember, these are not here just to recur cards once. There's a reason we have so many cards that exile 2 creatures at once, because this allows us to blink one of our Disguise dudes, one of our ETB dudes, and then one of the Witnesses, so that we can constantly get back our blink cards and keep doing those effects on our opponent. But now we need to get to the section that I harp on the most when I'm talking about commander stuff. Let's go ahead and talk about the removal and interaction. And of course, there's a Meteor Golem here. Why wouldn't there be? It's a flicker deck. We're flickering Meteor Golem. We're just blanking this card a bunch and blowing up everything on the board. What are our opponents going to do? Complain about the 4-cent precon include? Ah, no. Then we have Woodfall Primus. Enters the battlefield, destroy a non-creature permanent. It also has Persist. And remember, when a creature has Persist, we can avoid the cost of the downside of the Persist by just blinking the creature again. Rexage blows up any artifact or enchantment, and the reason most of our removal is creature-based is because this allows us to blink our removal. Duplicant can exile any non-token creature and then gain its power and toughness. We mainly just want it because it's going to be a blinkable way to exile creatures, getting around things like Indestructible. Titan of Industry. When it enters the battlefield, choose 2. Put a shield counter on a creature you control, gain 5 life, create a 4/4 Rhino, or blow up an artifact or enchantment. So 9 times out of 10, we're blowing up an artifact or enchantment, and we're putting a shield counter on our commander, so that if we get hit with something like a Blasphemous Act, our commander will survive it. That's another way to protect the important assets on our field. We could also use it just to spawn a ton of rhinos. That's a thing we can do. Then we have Kogla the Titan Ape, another blinkable destruction piece. Anytime it blinks, it fights a creature we don't control. And anytime it attacks, we can destroy an artifact or enchantment that somebody controls. So Kogla's doing a lot of work for us. Most of the time it's killing creatures. Sometimes it's going to be blowing up artifacts or enchantments. Then we have Beast Within, a card I wish I could fit into all of my budget decks. But Beast Within destroys any permanent at all, even a land, so Glacial Chasm can go bye-bye, and then its controller makes a 3/3 Beast token. Arcane Denial and Counterspell are both in here as easy access counters, and remember, we can do things like Blinking Torrential Gearhulk to cast them multiple times if we need to. Then we have the Terastodon. Blow up 3 non-creature permanents, give people elephants for every single one. Drop Terastodon on the board in its, in its little warded disguised state. Wait for your opponents to put something like a Bolas's Citadel down or an Omniscience, and then suddenly we're blinking the Terastodon and going, I hope you had nothing but instants to respond to this, otherwise you're losing all the important things you built up today for the cost of an Essence Flux. And then Resculpt, which is a really, really, really good removal. Exile any artifact or creature, and then give somebody a blue and red elemental creature token, which isn't super important. The fact that for 2 mana you have an exiling removal that is modal is absolutely astounding, and you should be playing more of this card if you are not. You should be playing, more interaction anyway, regardless of the words coming out of my mouth. But this is a good one you should probably be running more of if you can. And then finally, we get to the land section. Let's go ahead and begin from the bottom with the utility lands of the deck. We have the come back here. Litjara Mirror Lake. Comes into play tapped. We can use it for 6 mana, blow it up, and clone a creature that we have. A lot of our creatures have really good ETBs, so cloning them is just doubling up on those enter the battlefield effects. Mosswort Bridge has Hideaway 4, so when we play it, it enters the battlefield. We can look at the top 4 cards of our deck, take one of our overcosted creatures and put it under the Mosswort Bridge, and then if we've got creatures with power 10 or greater, which is really easy to do in our deck, we're just going to flip the Mosswort Bridge up, and then, or flip up the card under the Mosswort Bridge, and we get to play it essentially for free. Now, it is very, very important to note that if you are playing a deck that has the ability to exile not creatures you control like we are doing, but any permanent you control, you can actually keep abusing the Hideaway trigger on the Mosswort Bridge to dig deeper and deeper into your deck and keep casting spells for free. So this is a card with a lot more utility than I see people use it with all the time. Then we have 5 fetching lands. We have Escape Tunnel, which I'm super happy we finally get to use. Escape Tunnel, Evolving Wilds, and Terramorphic Expanse are all fetching lands we have access to now. Then we have Myriad Landscape and Bant Panorama. I love Bant Panorama because it comes into play untapped, and we can use it to get Simic lands on the board when we need. Myriad Landscape is a ramping land that gives us 2 lands of any one color. And then in our dual land section, the dual lands we are using, some of them are just good lands, and some of them are for specific purposes. So let's begin. We got the Command Tower for free, obviously. Then a Vine Glimmer Snarl, the Reveal land, reveal a forest or island, and then if you don't, it comes into play tapped. But then we got Tangled Islet. It is a forest island along with Rimewood Falls, which means that cards like Nature's Lore, Farseek, and Wood Elves can grab these dual lands out of the deck. If you do not have a dual land in your deck already, probably a good idea to shove one in, just because you get the ability to fetch them, and that's really important. Flooded Grove is our filter land. Hinterland Harbor is our check land. It's checking if we have a forest or island on the board. And Yavimaya Coast is a pain land that can tap for green or blue. And after that, we have 13 forests and 9 islands. 36 lands total in the deck because we've got a lot of ways to ramp in the deck. And we've got a Simic value deck that is getting creatures into play for basically 0 mana. You're getting big draw engines like Tishana and Prime Speaker for 0 mana. You're blinking them and cloning them with things like Vesuvian Duplimancy and Progenitor Mimic. We're cheating more cards on the battlefield than what our commander is already hinting at with things like Kadama of the East Tree. Things like Endray's Forerunners and Diluvian Primordial are providing win cons for the deck by letting us get either the best instants and sorceries from people's graves or building our boards to massive states and then giving them tons of power, which we also could do with Avenger of Zendikar. We've got big single hitters like the Pathrazor of Ulamog and Ulamog's Crusher that are doing lots of work for us in the meantime. Nobody wants to let one of these sit on the board for more than a turn or two anyway. And with that, we have finished the Simic Slime Girl Elf Commander Vannifar for Commander Mechanics Deck Challenge. A Markov Manor commander that people have been asking me to do in the Discord and the comment section, and I figured, hey, we might as well go ahead and do it. She doesn't fit within my $15 deck building restrictions, but she can fit within this challenge restriction, so I definitely cheated to make this video work, is what I'm saying. Anyways, let me know what you think in the comment section below. Let me know if you want more decks that are in this particular budget range as well, or if you want me to focus more on the $15 decks. I will be doing more $15 decks irrespective of what people say. That is a fixation that I am planning on burning myself out on. Because it's fun as hell to build those, just as a matter of course. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below. Hopefully you too enjoy playing some Slime Girl in the future. And as always, everybody, insert end video tagline here. Probably do that. They're the ones that instigated this as big back into bed. Hey, I just quickly want to give a thank you to all of my wonderful patrons who keep this show running. YouTube and Twitch are a pretty bumpy ride at the best of times, and the stability a Patreon provides me is worth more than I can say here. I'd also like to thank each and every one of my $20 and up patrons here, and they would be Red Joker, Blitzkrieg, Cameron, Dren, Jemshin, Smiling DM, Poundini, Mabbity Babbity, Naomi, Isaac, Agamotto, Jordan, Ravi, Giuni, Kiratorian, Prisma, all of you, I'm not saying that part, and Starlight. And finally, thank you to everyone else that helps keep this channel alive. While you're here, why not check out another video? And thank you for watching.